Welcome to NFL Talk. I'm Liam.
And I'm Olivia.
You're here with us today to deep dive into one of the most thrilling games this season.
The Ravens' victory over the Bengals.
35-34.
Yeah, it really does feel like whenever these two teams meet,
We're guaranteed a close one.
absolutely, and this time was no exception. Back and forth battle all night,
The Ravens fell behind early.
trailing by 14 points at one stage.
Wow.
You know, that's the largest deficit they've faced with Lamar Jackson at the helm in 3 years.
And against a Bengals team that had already beaten them in overtime earlier this season.
Exactly.
I can only imagine the tension for Ravens fans watching that game.
Oh, definitely.
But then wouldn't you know it, Lamar Jackson just flipped a switch in the fourth quarter.
He was phenomenal.
3 touchdown passes
And that last quarter alone, and let's not forget that scramble,
to avoid the sack.
turning what looked like a sure 20-yard loss into a 10-yard game.
Yeah.
That's the kind of play that can completely swing momentum.
It was almost like watching a magician pull a rabbit out of a hat.
But speaking of incredible plays,
Ja'Marr Chase.
he had himself a day.
For the Bengals,
He was simply unstoppable
11 catches.
for 264 yards and 3 touchdowns.
That included a 70-yard touchdown.
That tied the game late in the fourth.
It's pretty wild to think that Chase has now racked up 457 receiving yards in just 2 games against the Ravens this season.
That's an NFL record.
For receiving yards by a single player against a specific opponent.
I mean,
The Ravens' defense just couldn't seem to find an answer for him.
it was like he was playing a different sport out there.
But even with Chase putting on a show,
The Bengals couldn't quite seal the deal.
it came down to a bold decision by Bengals coach Zach Taylor to go for a 2-point conversion
In the win.
after they scored a touchdown with less than a minute left on the clock.
It was a high-risk, high-reward play.
That ultimately didn't pay off,
Burrow's pass was just a bit too high.
and the Ravens escaped with the victory.
I'm sure that decision will be debated for weeks to come, but hey, it's those kinds of gutsy calls that make the NFL so exciting.
Couldn't agree more. There was so much more to this game than just the final score.
Let's take a closer look at some of the other key moments and plays, shall we?
Absolutely. For starters, we saw Derrick Henry power his way into the end zone for a 1-yard touchdown run in the third quarter.
That play was crucial for the Ravens as it started to chip away at the Bengals' lead.
And then there was Tylan Wallace's incredible 84-yard touchdown catch
That brought the Ravens within 1 point of the Bengals.
and really put the pressure on.
And of course, we can't forget Mark Andrews.
Who hauled in an 18-yard touchdown pass from Jackson.
On the Bengals side, a holding call on Ravens cornerback Brandon Stevens gave them a fresh set of downs on their opening drive.
That was definitely a turning point early in the game.
Unfortunately, we also saw Ravens safety Kyle Hamilton leave the game.
With an ankle injury,
That's never good to see.
and we certainly hope it's nothing too serious.
It's worth mentioning that the Ravens, known for their dominant rushing attack,
Actually had their impressive 42-game streak of rushing for at least 100 yards snapped in this game.
isn't that something? The Bengals defense really stepped up.
And contained them on the ground.
And speaking of being contained, Bengals receiver T. Higgins was out for this matchup with a quad injury.
His absence definitely impacted the Bengals' offensive game plan.
But despite all the twists and turns,
All the incredible plays and unfortunate injuries,
it all came down to that final score.
Ravens 35.
Bengals 34.
A truly wild game that lived up to the hype of this intense rivalry.
So what does this win mean for both teams moving forward?
Well, starting with the Ravens, this win was huge for their playoff hopes.
They now sit atop the AFC North with a 7-3 record.
And Lamar Jackson is playing like a legitimate MVP candidate.
They're definitely looking like a team to watch out for.
As for the Bengals, this loss was a setback.
But they're not out of the playoff race by any means.
With a 4-6 record, they'll need to string together some wins to keep their postseason hopes alive.
It won't be easy, but with Burrow and Chase leading the way, you can never count this team out.
Especially in a conference as wide open as the AFC this year.
It's shaping up to be a very exciting finish to the season, and this Ravens-Bengals rivalry is only going to get more heated as we get closer to the playoffs.
We'll definitely be keeping a close eye on both of these teams.
But before we move on to analyze the individual performances, let's take a moment to appreciate the strategic chess match that unfolded on the field.
Absolutely. The coaches had their work cut out for them, and there were some really fascinating tactical battles throughout the game.
The Ravens' struggles in the run game, the Bengals' success with deep passes to Chase, the Ravens' use of pre-snap motion. There's a lot to unpack there.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion.
Each layer revealing another level of complexity and strategy.
And it's those details that often separate the great teams from the good ones.
So let's dive into some of those details and see what insights we can glean from this tactical showdown between two of the AFC's best.
Sounds like a plan.
Let's start with the Ravens' surprisingly ineffective rushing attack.
What do you think contributed to their struggles in that department?
Well, for starters, the Bengals' defense deserves a ton of credit.
They were incredibly disciplined in their run fits.
They really were. It felt like they had an answer for everything the Ravens tried to do on the ground.
And the absence of Marlon Humphreys, the Ravens' top cornerback, certainly didn't help.
Chase was able to exploit some of the matchups he had against the Ravens' backup corners.
That's a great point.
Humphrey's absence forced the Ravens to make some adjustments in their secondary, which may have indirectly affected their ability to commit as many resources to stopping the run.
It's like a domino effect.
Where one change can have ripple effects across the entire defense.
Exactly.
Now, on the flip side, the Bengals had a ton of success throwing the ball.
Particularly on deep passes to Ja'Marr Chase.
It felt like every time Burrow dropped back, he was looking for Chase downfield, and more often than not, he found him.
Chase is such a special talent.
His combination of speed, size, and route running ability makes him a nightmare for any cornerback.
Even someone as talented as Humphrey.
He's like a cheat code for the Bengals offense.
But it wasn't just Chase who made an impact.
Tyler Boyd also stepped up in a big way.
With T. Higgins out due to injury.
Absolutely. He had 6 catches for 81 yards and was a consistent threat underneath.
He really showed his versatility and proved to be a reliable target for Burrow.
Especially on that final drive where the Bengals went for the win.
And speaking of that final drive, let's talk about the Bengals' use of tempo and their aggressive play calling down the stretch.
They were really trying to dictate the pace of the game.
And put the Ravens' defense on its heels.
It was a risky strategy.
But it almost paid off.
They were moving the ball effectively and had the Ravens scrambling to keep up.
It was a testament to Burrow's composure and his ability to make quick decisions under pressure.
Absolutely.
Now shifting back to the Ravens.
One thing that stood out to me was their use of pre-snap motion and shifts.
They do that a lot.
And it's very effective at creating confusion for the defense.
It can be really tough for opposing defenses to keep track of all the moving parts when the Ravens are in their sugar huddle and constantly shifting guys around.
It's a testament to their offensive creativity and their ability to keep defenses guessing.
And it often leads to mismatches and big plays, as we saw several times in this game.
Overall, I thought both teams were well coached and prepared.
They both made some adjustments throughout the game, and it was a really fascinating chess match to watch unfold.
He was a great example of two elite teams battling it out.
Each trying to outmaneuver the other.
And ultimately, it came down to a few key plays.
And a bold decision that didn't quite pan out.
But that's the beauty of the NFL, right? Every game is a story waiting to be written, and you never know what twists and turns are in store.
Well said.
Speaking of stories,
let's shift our focus to some of the individual performances that really stood out in this game.
Sounds good to me. We've already touched on the brilliance of Lamar Jackson and Ja'Marr Chase, but there were other players who deserve some recognition for their contributions to this epic showdown.
Absolutely.
So let's shine a light on some of those unsung heroes and see what made their performances so special. For the Ravens, I thought Mark Andrews had another solid game.
He's such a reliable target for Jackson, especially in those crucial moments.
5 catches for 64 yards and a touchdown.
That's just another day at the office for Andrews.
And on the Bengals side, I was really impressed with Tyler Boyd's performance.
He really stepped up in T. Higgins' absence, didn't he?
6 catches for 81 yards, and he was a consistent threat underneath, especially on that final drive.
Absolutely. He made some clutch catches, showing his value as a reliable option for Burrow.
So both teams had their stars shining bright.
But in the end, it was the Ravens who found a way to pull out the victory.
They showed incredible resilience coming back from that 14-point deficit to snatch the win.
That's the kind of grit you need if you're aiming for a championship.
No doubt about it. Now let's zoom out a bit and talk about what this win means for the Ravens moving forward.
This win really solidifies their position at the top of the AFC North.
With a 7-3 record, they're in the driver's seat.
And with Lamar Jackson playing at such a high level, they have to be considered one of the favorites in the AFC.
Absolutely. But as we saw in this game, they're not invincible.
Teams that can slow down their running game have a chance to upset them.
Now, how about the Bengals? What are your thoughts on their outlook after this tough loss?
Well, they're 4-6 now, which isn't ideal.
But the AFC's wide open this year, and they're still very much in the playoff hunt.
Yeah, let's not forget they have the offensive firepower to beat anyone.
With Burrow and Chase leading the charge.
Exactly. They just need to find a way to be more consistent.
They've had some impressive wins this season, but they've also had some head-scratching losses.
If they can put it all together down the stretch, they could be a dangerous team in the playoffs.
No doubt about it. This Bengals team is capable of making a run if they can find their rhythm.
Before we wrap up, I have to ask about the Ravens-Bengals rivalry.
It always seems to be a heated battle when these two teams meet.
It's one of the best rivalries in the NFL, in my opinion.
There's so much history and intensity between these two organizations, and the games are always close and exciting.
You never know what's going to happen when the Ravens and Bengals clash.
It's a rivalry that always delivers.
I can't wait to see what happens the next time they face off.
But for now, let's take a closer look at some of the individual performances that caught our eye.
Sounds good to me. I think we've only scratched the surface of what made this game so compelling.
Let's dive a bit deeper into some of the standout players and explore what made their contributions so impactful.
For example, I thought Derrick Henry's performance for the Ravens deserves some recognition.
He didn't have a ton of room to work with.
But he kept grinding and eventually found the end zone.
You're right, he might not have had his usual explosive runs.
But he showed his determination and played a crucial role in keeping the Ravens' offense moving.
And for the Bengals?
I think Kyler Boyd deserves a shout-out for stepping up in T. Higgins' absence.
Absolutely. He proved to be a reliable target for Burrow, making some clutch catches.
And racking up 81 receiving yards.
He really showcased his versatility and value to the Bengals offense.
Speaking of valuable players, let's circle back to Lamar Jackson's performance.
That play where he turned a potential 20-yard loss into a 10-yard gain was simply remarkable.
It was like watching a magician escape from a straitjacket.
His ability to escape pressure and make plays outside the pocket is what makes him such a unique and dangerous quarterback.
He's a true game changer, and his performance in the fourth quarter was a masterclass in resilience and determination.
And on the other side of the ball,
Jamar Chase continues to be a thorn in the Ravens' side.
457 receiving yards in 2 games against them this season.
That's just insane.
It seems like he always saves his best for the Ravens.
Burrow knows exactly where to find him no matter the coverage, and Chase consistently makes big plays.
He's a nightmare matchup for any team, but especially for the Ravens.
All right, so we've talked about the stars.
But are there any other unsung heroes from this game that stood out to you?
You know, I thought the Bengals' defensive line as a unit played exceptionally well.
They really did. They were a big reason why the Ravens couldn't get their running game going. They were consistently disruptive and made life difficult for Lamar Jackson.
They were relentless in their pursuit of the ball carrier, and their performance was the big reason why the Bengals were able to stay in the game.
And for the Ravens, I thought their offensive line, despite the struggles in the run game, did a commendable job of protecting Lamar Jackson, especially given the pressure the Bengals' defensive front was generating.
You're absolutely right. They faced a tough challenge, but they held their own and gave Jackson enough time to make plays.
They might not have had their best game in terms of run blocking, but their pass protection was crucial in allowing Jackson to orchestrate that fourth quarter comeback.
So while the spotlight often shines on the quarterbacks and star receivers, it's important to acknowledge the contributions of the players in the trenches.
Absolutely. Football is a team sport, and it's the collective effort that ultimately determines the outcome.
And in a game as close as this one, every play, every block, every tackle can make a difference.
It's those small details that often go unnoticed but are essential to success.
Well said. I think we've covered a lot of ground today, from the big plays to the small details, from the strategic decisions to the emotional impact.
It was a game that had it all, and it was a privilege to break it down with you.
The Ravens emerged victorious, but the Bengals proved they're a force to be reckoned with. This AFC race is going to be a nail-biter all the way to the end.
Absolutely, and I, for one, can't wait to see what unfolds next. Goodbye, and see you in the next video.